invite you to spend the next half hour with Sri Klemp, the Mahanta, the Living Egg Master. As the spiritual leader of...
The title is, If God is God, then who are you? Yeah, it puzzled me too. The talk is basically about being a co-worker with God, or a helper or assistant with God, or assistant of God. Sometimes people say, I'm so tired of hearing this talk about being a co-worker with God. Why don't you talk about something more interesting like soul travel or some kind of thing, you know, flying around through space, or prophecies through dreams and the like. Yeah. And I'd like to, but is it really so helpful for people spiritually in the long run? Now, these things are very exciting, no question, and I'm very interested in them myself. But basically, this is something like soul travel and dreams and learning the future. It's better you do it yourself, because until you do, it's just somebody else telling you, hey, here is truth, accept it because I've told you. Well, a good teacher won't let a student do that. I had a teacher once in high school who said, whenever somebody questioned him about something, I believe it was in history or something, he'd say, he just finally shrugged his shoulders. He was an easygoing guy. He'd say, just take my word for it. And this leaves the student sort of wondering, well, what is this class all about? You know, aren't there books or something to document what this man is saying to us? As far as he was concerned, no. Didn't make a bit of difference. And maybe it doesn't. But I think it's better if you go and learn these things for yourself. My job is to show you the ways. Your job is to go do the ways. Remember that we talked about things like a co-worker with God, assistant of God, and sometimes God's little helper. Well, this is the story of a little girl, 18 months old, who helped her mother find better health. The mother was having some health problems. She had some fatty cysts on her throat, and there was pain in her heart region, and she found breathing very difficult. So she asked the Mahanta, the Living Egg Master, this is the spiritual leader of Ekankar, both as the outer master and as the inner master. She asked the Mahanta, the Living Egg Master, who also incidentally happens to be me, yours truly, could she have some help in finding better health? And so then she let the matter drop. A few days later, she was paying a visit to her sister, who was also an egg. And then while she brought her little girl along, and the little girl has a habit of, just as little as infants of that age will, they want to bring something to their parent. And so this little girl is always bringing something to her mother. But this particular time, she brought a book to her, which was by Anne Wigmore. The title is Be Your Own Doctor. And the mother thought, well, what is this? You know, just another book. But the little girl looked at her and held her hand on the book and looked her mother in the eye and said with her eyes, this book Mommy is special. And so the mother said, all right, I'll read it. So she flipped through this book, and she got to page 6, and something jumped out at her. The author was writing something about hydrogenated oils. This means something that's been done with oils in the process of manufacturing to extend the shelf life, regardless of what benefits or harm the food may have for the person who consumes it, because sometimes the results aren't in yet. Well, anyway, the mother read this, and she said, what are hydrogenated oils? So after she left her sister, and over the next few days or so, she began to do her own research about the nature of hydrogenated oils. Now, for 18 years, this woman was eating, as she said, clean. She felt she wasn't eating junk foods anymore, but this thing about hydrogenated oils, what was that? Well, in her research, she came to the conclusion that this ingredient that's found in many foods was a poison to her. When she came home, she had gone through her pantry, and she looked at bread mixes, and she looked at cereals, you know, some of the certain cereals and so on, and salad dressings and mayonnaise and the like. And she kept coming up with this word, hydrogenated oils. And from her research, she said, why, this stuff's no good. It's been hurting me. And she absolutely stopped it. She threw all these things out in her pantry, in her food storage area at home. She threw it all out. Then, of course, she had to go out, shop again, and find food and cook everything from scratch. Now, it's difficult to do today for most of us to cook from scratch. My wife and I do. We have to for our health, because it takes time. It takes a lot of time. But within 2 weeks' time, the mother noticed that the cysts on her throat had gone down to half size, and her breathing was easy. Her breathing was normal, the way it should have been, and she felt that her heart didn't hurt anymore. And she said that even though it takes a lot of time, her family's health is worth it. But the interesting point here is that a little girl who was only 1.5 years old was the instrument for the Holy Spirit to bring the information to her mother and say, with her eyes, this is special. Here is the answer for the question you ask of the Mahanta, the living Ek Master. So, one case. If God is God, then who are you? Maybe we can address that a little. God is God beyond words. I don't have the words to describe the Supreme Being. And if I were to try to mention some of the ways that have been used symbolically to explain God, like the ocean of love and mercy, that is the home of God. Sure, it helps people. Or sometimes some people say, well, in this world, perhaps, this world, this ocean of love and mercy, it's all light, no shadows. And it seems there is a hazy sun in the sky that you can't quite see, but you can. Well then, That's God, or Sugmad as we say. Now this is in the highest region. To explain here, many of the different religions of the world have established their heavens at different places. Some of the heavens are on the astral plane. Spiritualism and any of the very emotional religions like to be established on the astral plane because it's the place of emotions. The causal plane, which is actually the basement of the mental plane, both part of the same house, the causal plane and the mental plane will generally have things like the major religions. Christianity will be in the mental plane, which is on the ground floor level, which is a very good area. And the color that is often seen there is blue. This is the color of the Mahanta appearing to people who have the consciousness of the mental area. Sometimes people report seeing a blue light and they say, well, who is that? What is it? What does the light mean? What is the star, the blue star or the blue globe? It's the Mahanta, the inner form of the living Ek Master, showing up in the mental regions for those people who can reach Him. Now the Holy Spirit has two aspects. These are sound and light. This is what the Holy Spirit is, sound and light, the creative principle. And so when God said, let there be the lower worlds, it was the voice of God speaking. And when the voice of God is speaking, these things formed. The lower worlds formed. Why? So that there would be a place for people to go through pain. There was a lot of pleasure in the high worlds of God, but souls there were just enjoying it and learning nothing. Now, one of the secrets of spiritual doctrine is that, this will sound like heresy, that God learns through you or through the experiences of soul. God creates soul, creates the place where soul can have all these experiences, and then watches to see what souls learn as they run around loose in this world with free will. Now this was one of the gifts that soul got. The Holy Spirit, the voice of God, at one point came and created soul. These are the sparks of God, stars of God. You are a spark of God, you are soul. You are made of the same substance as God, or at least as the Holy Spirit, which is sound and light. The next story is from Mike in Nigeria. One of his friends was very sick from typhoid fever. He woke up one morning with the idea to go out and gather 3 herbs, which he knew would help his friend, because this was one of the traditional remedies in African medicine. Now, he said, this is certainly worth the sacrifice to go out and look for these herbs, because my friend is sick. Now, this is the whole point about life. We sacrifice and we learn to give to others, because God is love. Now, if someone wants to become a coworker with God, then that individual, meaning you, also, that individual has to learn how to have compassion and love when it's needed. And also the discrimination to know when and when it's not needed. So anyway, he goes out to gather these 3 herbs. He comes to the first place, it's real close to home, gets it. Now he says all he's got to do is get the others. Now this is rather wild living compared to what most of us are used to. So Mike sets out through the bush to a place that he remembered, which is a pretty good walk, through paths and through a lot of brush and so on, to where there used to be these other 2 herbs. After a while he comes to the place and he finds they're cut down. There are no herbs here. They'd been cut down for farming. So now he's got a problem. He's got one of the herbs, he needs 2 more so that he can help his friend with the typhoid fever. So Mike begins to walk back home, and he says, what will I do? You see, the only other place that he knew of that had these other 2 herbs required a trip on public transportation. By public, I mean commercial transportation. Means he had to have money. Well, he'd been going through some very hard times. He had just enough money to go to the place where another place he knew where there were these herbs. But then there wouldn't have been enough money to deliver these herbs to his friend. So as he's walking home, thinking about all this, he says, maybe I could borrow money from one of my friends, and then I could take public transportation and deliver the herbs. So while he's doing this, going through all this, lost in thought, he missed the short path to home. Now this is rugged country. It went the long way. Well, he wasn't used to this path, but he didn't notice it until he'd gone a long ways along it. And then he became curious. There was something inside him that said, keep going, Mike. See what's at the end of the road. He did. He came to a compound, place of dwellings, where people lived. And there he found both of the other herbs growing in abundance. He also found that this place was a lot closer to home than the place that had been cut down for farming. And he didn't have to take public transportation. He still had his money. So he looked this whole thing over. He looked it all over and he said, it was very important, this mission of his, because a friend was sick. And he said, this was worth it, trying to be a co-worker with God, because it was a big problem and would be of very much help to his friend. If God is God, then who are you? You are one of the lights of God, moving about in this world, asking, sometimes minute by minute, sometimes day by day, God, what can I do now? What can I do now to learn more about your love and mercy? And so then, the Holy Spirit, or the Ek, will provide an opportunity. And believe me, there are lots of opportunities. In Spain, the following case is the story of Shelley. She's working in Spain. One day as she was going to work, she looks down the road, but she says, Mahanta. I speak of Mahanta here, which is the inner master, which is the, how can you say it, the matrix of the Ek or the Holy Spirit in human form, so that people who wish have someone they can work with, someone that is more than just sound and light in the pure sense, although sometimes the Mahanta appears as a blue light, and the Ek Masters may also have a sound associated with them. When they're near, sometimes people perceive them by either a light or as a sound of a certain type, like for instance bells. A certain master may have the sound of bells accompany him, or it may be any other thing. Flute sometimes, or the music may be also associated with one of the heavens in the other worlds, because basically the sound and light are connected to a state of consciousness. And this state of consciousness exists whether people are looking toward a heaven of a particular religion, or whether they're looking for an individual who has that state of consciousness. Well, anyway, Shelley wants to be a helper for the Ek, the Holy Spirit. So as she's driving down the side road, as she's about to get onto the main road, she declares herself a vehicle for the Holy Spirit and says, "Allow me to do thy will today. Give me a chance to be your co-worker." The point was, she meant it from the bottom of her heart. So she's about to turn onto the main road to go to work when she looks off to the side of the road and sees a man hitchhiking. Somebody is trying to get a ride. He's got his hand out, trying to stop cars by flagging them down. She catches his attention and says, "Come on, get in." The man gets in, and as they go down the road, he says he's going to a certain town. She says, "Well, I can take you part of the way because that's where I work." He says, "Fine." And so, when she gets to her town, she drops him off, goes to work, but at work things that day are very slow. Nothing's happening. So, rather than put up with boredom for the rest of the day, Shelley says to her boss, "What if I go in the next town and straighten out some of the paperwork in our office there?" Sounds like a good idea. The boss says, "Good idea, off you go." So as Shelley's in the car, she's thinking back to having picked up the hitchhiker. Just as she was on the little road approaching the main road, before she went to work, she had asked or declared herself a vehicle for God, and it was less than a minute when this man needs a ride. She says, "Boy, that was quick." So now she left work, she's going to the next town to the company's other office, another office there. 2 miles down the road, who does she see? You guessed it. This very same hitchhiker she had just picked up before. So, of course, she pulls over, gets in. He says, "I don't know what I would have done without you." And then he said, "I've got to be in court in 10 minutes. They were 8 minutes from court. And so as they're going, he tells his story. He said he was from the Sahara Desert. He had brought his entire family to Spain. He had all the papers for them. The only person of his family remaining behind was his daughter. She was still in the Sahara Desert waiting for the papers so that she could come over and join the family. And the hitchhiker said, "Today, I plan to do something about it in court." With only 2 minutes to spare, she dropped him off at the courthouse steps. Then she said, "I'm your angel today." And he said to her, "Allah is good." Because Shelley had been thinking, while this is all going on, it must either be very important for this man to get to the courthouse, or that I have a chance to be a helper or an assistant for God, a coworker. As a matter of fact, both of these things were true. Shelley realized, though, that if one wants to be a coworker, one must also have an open state of consciousness. One must be open to the inner master, to the Mahanta, or whoever your inner master is, and to the needs of others. Otherwise, you can't be of help. Why not? Because you aren't recognizing the need that's right there within arm's reach. So today we were talking about the ancient truths from modern times, and I would like to, in closing, to assure you that God's love is with you all the time, but it's up to you to recognize it through hard times and the good times. God's love is making you more of a spiritual being so that you can better understand the conditions and situations that other people, that other souls, that other lights of God are going through too. And in doing so, you are able to serve them and all life better. So, may the blessings be